Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and this is Ask A Herbert Erpaderp with me, Herbert Erpaderp. I shall dispense answers and respond to comments soon, but first I'm going to ramble about bolt action, just a little bit. I'm sure those of you who care about bolt action already know about the 2nd edition rulebook coming in September, and the new Band of Brothers starter set that comes with it. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of excited about it, even though I rarely actually play the game. I have pre-ordered the starter set, so when it does eventually show up here, I will be making a video about it. Probably a few really, because there's so much in the box. I didn't see anything more specific than mid-September in regards to the actual release date on the Warlord site, but according to Amazon, the rulebook ships on the 20th of September, so I assume the same goes for the starter set. I'm hoping it doesn't take too long to arrive and it gets here before October. Fingers crossed. I pre-ordered directly from the Warlord site, rather than from a local seller, because not only did the base price work out to be cheaper by about $10, but shipping was also free because the order is over £50. However, it would not be eligible for free shipping from my favourite local seller because they only give free shipping for orders over $150. The box set cost about $121 from the Warlord site, or $130 something from the local seller. So, considering the shipping I would have to pay locally, it worked out to be closer to $20 cheaper to order this from Warlord's store rather than here in Australia. The point I'm trying to get at is probably obvious to most, but definitely do your research when buying your models, or anything really. Being a smart man and figuring I was saving money, I also added another shiny and new thing to the order from Warlord that I'm pretty excited about. Anyone who can correctly guess what that is gets 1,000 internet points. So, what actually comes in the Band of Brothers starter set? Well, to be honest, at a glance, it looks to me a lot like the D-Day Firefight set from 2014. It is different though, most obviously because you get the 2nd edition rulebook. Not only that, but you get 24 of the new plastic US Airborne figures, which I'm guessing is relevant to the starter box being named Band of Brothers. Is it more than a coincidence they would name it Band of Brothers? I don't think the models in this box will be anything more than generic American airborne dudes. That's certainly the impression the pictures give, which, by the way, I've stolen from Warlord's site, so if they look crappy in the video, you can go there and have a look. I'll include a link in the description below. If this is something you care about, you've probably seen them anyway. From what I know, Warlord doesn't have a specific Band of Brothers Easy Company set modelled after the characters in the awesome miniseries Band of Brothers, but it would be great if they did. Maybe it's a hint of things to come. I don't know, but it sounds like a good idea to me. You could paint these models to be Easy Company anyway, but it would be cool to have figures that represent the characters from the show. I might be wrong, they might actually already exist without my knowing. If this is the case, somebody tell me. Okay, so we obviously get some Germans in the box too. These aren't anything new or particularly special, just a set of 12 plastic German grenadiers. These will be great to add some more infantry to my German army, which at this stage is almost entirely tanks. You do only get 12 Germans versus the 24 Americans. I guess this is either because they're better in the game, or maybe it's because you also get this SDKFZ Alf's D 3.7cm pack half-track. The Americans don't get a vehicle. The D-Day Firefight box set comes with a half-track too, but I do believe it was a slightly different one. This one obviously has a 37mm gun in the top. Having not built it, I don't know if you can actually build it as a different version, but you could play it without the gun and just use it as a transport if you wanted to anyway. I've not yet built a Warlord German half-track, so that'll be fun, and we'll see how it compares to Rubicon's model. Also included in the box is the plastic ruined farm. I'm pretty sure this is the same as the one that came in both the D-Day Firefight and Assault on Normandy box sets. Not that that's a complaint, more terrain pieces are always welcome, and you can build this one in quite a few different ways. The other things that come in Band of Brothers look to be pretty much the same as the D-Day Firefight box. You get some pin markers, order dice, D6s, and a quick start guide. Another new thing in this box is templates. With a new rulebook, we are bound to see changes. One of those changes is high explosive weapons now use a template. I've seen mixed opinions on this, which I guess is to be expected. I saw one person make a very angry post about it, which I thought was quite funny. Personally, having not yet played it myself or read the new rules, I don't really know much of anything, but I am leaning towards it being good. The other day I watched the Beasts of War 2nd edition demo game and the new template rules were obviously used in that. I will include a link in the description, though I would figure a lot of you have already seen it. Anyway, there was an amusing artillery mishap in that game which I don't believe was possible in the previous edition. In my opinion, that kind of thing makes the game more fun. Also, now the commander will be able to choose to draw a number of friendly order dice and activate several units at once, depending on the commander's rank. The higher the rank, the more additional dice he can draw. I think that sounds kind of interesting, though I don't fully understand the specifics of the mechanic yet, but it does sound interesting. Other changes include machine guns becoming slightly more powerful, flamethrowers becoming slightly less powerful, and something I think is really cool is that, to my understanding, transports can now drive around and shoot even when the unit they were transporting has disembarked. That seems quite good to me and makes transports more valuable to bring along. But then, I'm no expert on the rules of bolt action, or any game really. In fact, I'm really forgetful and I don't remember half of them anyway. And I'm definitely not one of those people that gets all serious and angry about rules. It's only game, why you have to get mad? I just can't bring myself to care that much about the rules of playing with little plastic shooty mans on the table, as much as I do enjoy them. What I'm trying to get at in my inarticulate way is that if you're someone like that, my opinion is probably not one you want, and I would recommend everyone form their own opinion anyway. But if you do want my opinion, I think the new changes look good and interesting, and I'm really excited to play with them. It seems to me the game works much the same way as it did beforehand anyway, just with some minor improvements. The good thing is that all the points values of the models will stay the same. Only the German army book is actually being changed, and I think that's because it was the first one they released. But other than that, all the books will remain current, which is nice. I say this frowning at my 40k codexes, or codices. There are some things about the Band of Brothers starter set that I find a little bit disappointing. Kind of minor concerns, really. The first is the fact that the included rulebook is a softcover book. I believe the book in D-Day Firefight was also softcover, but the first edition rulebook I have is a hardcover that came in the Assault on Normandy box set. I would really like it if Band of Brothers also had a hardcover rulebook, or an option for one. Like I said, minor complaint, but it would be nice. I know I could still buy the hardcover rulebook by itself, but I just can't justify that cost. I was actually tempted to pre-order it, but only because people who pre-order the hardcover rulebook separately get a free general pattern figure as a bonus. I do kind of wish that came with the starter set pre-order too, but oh well, we can't have everything. As I said, I do have the Assault on Normandy box set, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to do a video on that box. It is an old starter set that was released in 2012, I believe, but the infantry figures are still available in their own boxes. So I'm not going to do a build video on those models, but I will do painting videos about them eventually. And because I'm not doing a build video, I might just add a quick assembly section at the beginning of those painting videos. It's not something that'll be happening soon though. So far I've only built a couple of the Americans. I've discovered that I quite enjoy building infantry when I go to a friend's place to work on models and watch stuff. That's how most of my Soviet infantry and the artillery Germans got built, and that's how the Assault on Normandy stuff will get built, as well as most of the Band of Brothers stuff. I do have a lot of plans for videos on things I feel are more exciting than the Assault on Normandy infantry figures, and it is important to spend your time on things that excite you as best you can. Making videos about the Assault on Normandy infantry figures isn't really something that excites me. Okay, so I did ramble a bit longer than I had intended. Anyway, what do you guys think? Are you going to get the Band of Brothers box set? Are you excited for the new edition of Bolt Action? I'd love to see what you think in the comments section below. Now, let's get to some questions. Jake Painter says, what first got you into modelling? Also, I love the new look, and that tank would make a sweet boss in a video game. Smiley face. Look forward to more awesome videos. I'm learning a good bit from them. Smiley face. Thanks, Jake. It really makes me happy that you, and other people I hope, are learning from the videos I make. I've been learning a lot from them myself, partially just from fucking up myself as I do things, and quite a lot from the comments people leave, which I think is great. What got me into modelling kind of has two answers. I'm going to show some of my old 40k models while I ramble because they're slightly relevant and I don't think I've shared them before. Okay, when I was a kid I was really into trains, which naturally turned into an interest in model railways, and I would constantly be reading model railway books and magazines. I'm old, and when I was young we had these things made of dead trees called books and magazines that we got our information from. Model trains are expensive though, so I never really had very many of them, but I always wanted more stuff to add to my little model railway. So that would be things like houses and cars and all of this stuff probably totally wrong in scale. But I didn't really care about that sort of thing, I guess because I was a kid. It also led to me buying model tank and plane kits because I thought they were kind of cool, even though I was more interested in trains. The thing is, they were cheap enough for a kid to pick up a kit or two. Nothing too fancy, just the small kind of kits you get from companies like Airfix and Revel. Revel? I'm not sure of the correct pronunciation. Anyway, they were cheap and pretty easy to build. They weren't very good quality, but it didn't really matter to me. As I grew up, I became less interested in models of any kind in favour of stuff like music and drinking way too much. but I did always have a kind of vague interest, kind of a voice in my head saying, yeah, these things are cool, if that makes sense. I never got into wargaming of any kind as a kid. I think the main reason for that is I grew up in Australia in a pretty bogan-filled area. If you don't know what a bogan is, think of a chav or a redneck. That's a pretty reasonable comparison. There weren't really many other nerdy kids around to make friends with to start, and since it was the olden days, I guess things like D&D or Warhammer weren't really as widespread here through things like the internet. I don't know, but that's my best guess. The nerdy friends I did have were into things like Star Trek, model kits, and video games, none of which is surprising. Wargaming just never really entered my world. As I got older, I learned vague things of it, but never really gave it much thought. Fast forward to a bunch of years ago and I was dating a girl that was into Warhammer, both fantasy and 40k, but largely 40k with Tyranids, a girl who likes bugs and cool things like that. This made me think, hey, yeah, this is cool. I'd never really put together the thought that it's fun to build models and it's fun to play games, so it must then be really fun to build models and play games with them. So I ended up collecting a Tau army for 40k, some of which you can see in the background now, and some Empire models for fantasy which mostly haven't been built. Fast forward even more years and I've lost interest in Games Workshop and their products and developed a stronger interest in tanks and World War II, and thus drifted more towards games and models that reflect that interest, which is obviously what you see on my channel now. That was a bit of a long rambling answer, so I hope it's satisfactory. Top Bunk Productions says, Mr. Erpaderp, I have a Tamiya 1/35th scale T62, but I don't just want it to be in regular Russian green. Can you suggest any wild, wacky, or otherwise eye-catching colour schemes to paint on it? My first instinct is to say paint it pink, which is always a good choice. But then, along those lines, I thought it might be fun to paint the model like the ones you see in the Russian tank biathlon. I'll put a couple of pictures on screen now. I think the tanks they used here were T-72s and not T-62s, and I don't know if anyone used a T-62 for anything like tank biathlons, but it's a good real-life example of brightly coloured tanks, which I think is really cool. And if you squint, T-62s and T-72s kind of look the same. You've got to squint really hard though. It's not too great a stretch of the imagination if you do want a somewhat realistic reason for a brightly painted T-62. Not that you actually need one, of course. I mean, there's real examples of tanks painted pink as well, but the only reason you really need is I wanted to. Also, if you've not seen them, the tank biathlon is pretty cool. The videos about it I've seen on YouTube aren't in English, so I have no idea what they're saying, but it's still pretty cool. Check it out. And now to respond to some comments. On my church ruin painting video, Joe's Model Kits says, Great work, Herbert, that looks great, mate. Shame about the static grass applicator, but you did fine without it. Top job. Thanks, Joe. I do think the grass looks okay, and I guess it isn't really the focus point of the model. I think in this case, not having the applicator actually worked out okay. The grass is thin and not all standing up nicely, but maybe that makes it look more like grass that has been destroyed along with the church and is now regrowing. I think it works out to be a good example to show you that you don't actually need fancy tools like a static grass applicator. I mean, it definitely gives a better result and it's much quicker to use one, but you can get by without. If you're on a tight budget, you'd be better off spending the money elsewhere, like more shiny models. The new one I have coming cost almost $60, but it was the only reasonably priced one I could find that would use mains power instead of batteries. The old one was $20 or so, but it used D-cell batteries, which can get expensive. I did see the cost as being worth it to get nice straight grass, but your mileage may vary. It is a tool I really like having, so I think it's worth the money. And of course I am talking about Australian dollars, which aren't really worth much of anything. On my Tamiya King Tiger build video, Daniel McNett says, I just ordered this model and realised I don't have enough money on my Amazon gift card to buy Tamiya paint. Does anybody know a good substitution for model paint when it comes to painting a model like this? I'm not sure he will see this, but I figured I would respond here anyway. If you mean stuff like artists' acrylics, it can be done, but chances are you won't get a very good result. You can get away with it on terrain and scenery items for the most part, but for a detailed miniature it's going to be more effort than it's worth. You will definitely be better off using actual miniature paints. If you are asking about different brands of specific model paints, there are quite a few options. I don't consider myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I really quite like Vallejo's model paints, be it Model Color, Game Color, Model Air, and so forth. I've always found them to be quite effective and easy to use, both with the airbrush and regular brush painting. That said, I've also had more limited experience with both Atelier and AK Interactive's acrylic paint sets. The Italeri paints were pretty good, I'd say at least as good as Vallejo. AK Interactive were also pretty good. It seemed to me like they were a little bit thinner than your average non-airbrush specific acrylic paint, which isn't a bad thing. It seems to me the guys who primarily paint larger scale models like the Tamiya King Tiger generally prefer stuff like Tamiya and Humbrol paints. I've not had recent experience with either of those brands, but from what I can tell they're roughly the same in quality as the other brands I have mentioned. I bet that has just made somebody really mad. Settle down, it's just paint. I have no experience with the likes of P3 paints or Army Painter's acrylic paints, but I've heard they're pretty good too. And I do quite like Army Painter's quick shade ink washes. My answer is probably not all that helpful, really. If you just want to be told what to buy, I would say Vallejo is the way to go. A better answer, I think, is if you're in a position to do so, buy a few different brands and try them out and see which ones you like best. Some people are very passionate about their paints, and will tell you to only use brand X. I've never been a very brand loyal kind of guy, and I like trying different things to see which ones work best for me. So I think most of the well-known brands of model paint are reasonably similar and can even be used together for the most part. If you're thinking about getting into the hobby and painting more than just 1 or 2 tanks, I would certainly suggest trying a few different brands. After a few years, you'll probably have collected a few different things and learned which colours from what brands you like best for certain applications. Hopefully that's at least a little bit helpful. I did get a little bit rambly there. Shixlow says, have you got the Rums charge yet? In the Grimble's Beast set, you said you were going to make Rums charge next. I just like rolling my R's like that. Rums charge. Rah. I am easily amused. And I did respond in the comments, but I figured I would elaborate here too. My plan was, and still is, to get the Rums charge box after I'd finished painting the Grimball's Beasts box, which I obviously haven't done yet. The good news is the Grimball's Beasts infantry are painted, and the vehicles will be a little bit quicker for me to paint. The bad news is that they're not finished. This is because, as I mentioned before, my static grass applicator stopped working. I don't want to add the grass to my infantry the same way as I did in the church ruin video because I don't think it looks quite as good, and I do want these models to look as good as they can. And I don't care so much for a terrain piece that is likely to have its grass crushed down when models are sat on it anyway. I do have a new static grass applicator on the way, and the Grimball's Beasts infantry painting video will be up as soon as I can get it done. It's already partially edited. After that, I was thinking it would make sense to paint the half tracks, but I don't know. What do you guys think? I'll make a poll, which, unless for some reason I fail at the YouTubes, will appear in a card now. If there's no card, it will appear in a link in the description. Maybe both. Anyway, vote for the vehicle in the Grimball's Beasts box set that you want to see painted first. That is half-tracks, Shermans, or Pershings. I will take the top 2 results of that poll and give my patrons the final choice as to which model gets painted first. So if you do want to get in on that decisive poll, you'll have to become a supporter on Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, my most recent patrons are Kelgtar, as I mentioned in the previous semi-Ask A Herbert Erpaderp return video thing. I figured I would give you another shout out because this is the first proper Ask A Herbert Erpaderp and you were the first patron, so thanks, it really means a lot. Also, a massive thank you to Kara, Earl Arndt? I don't know how to pronounce that surname, but it is on screen, so thank you. And last, but certainly not least, Martin Strickfuss. You are all awesome. Thank you so much for your support, it really means a lot, and I will have some more patron-only polls for you guys soon. Other bonuses to becoming a patron include seeing my videos a little bit early. Patrons see them on Saturday before everybody else sees them on Monday, except for Ask A Herbert Erpaderp because I don't want to have to pre-record that too early. The plan for Ask A Herbert Erpaderp is to finish the video on Tuesday nights, render it as I go to bed, and then patrons will get to see it in the morning, and it will be on YouTube in the evening. This is of course local time for me, your time may vary. Anyway, patrons get to see my main content a few days early. If that interests you, head on over to patreon.com/HerbertErpaderp. A link is on screen and in the description, so go check it out. It's not mandatory or expected really, but I sure do appreciate it. You can probably tell, but this is now the end of the video where I say things like leave any comments, questions or suggestions in the comments section, especially questions you want me to answer in the next Ask A Herbert Erpaderp in 2 weeks time, which by my reckoning is September 14th. I will of course probably pick a few comments from the other videos to respond to as well. Speaking of other videos, the 2 videos in this end card are the 2 most recent videos on my channel. If you've not seen them already, you can go ahead and click them to go and watch. And of course, if you haven't already, I would recommend you click the subscribe button for reasons. Good reasons. Thanks to those who asked questions, and an extra thanks to my patrons for being amazing. I'll be back again soon, so until then, happy modelling and thanks for watching. Farewell.